Radio host called her a slut, in addition to 45 other personal attacks.
Ms. Fluke, have you ever heard of not having sex?
She's having so much sex, it's amazing she can still walk.
She's having so much sex, she's going broke buying contraceptives and wants us to buy them.
It makes her a slut, right? Makes her a prostitute. She wants to be paid to have sex.
If we are going to pay for your contraceptives and thus pay for you to have sex, we want you to post the videos online so we can all watch.
WLS shouldn't talk about women this way. Our community deserves better
Can
than
U.S.
this.
immigration agents rummage through your laptop and cell phone for no reason and examine everything in them anytime you cross the border? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The answer, according to a recent decision by New York Federal District Court Judge Edward Corman, is yes. ICE or any other government law enforcement agent can search and read and retain anything in your electronic devices without any reason whatsoever anytime you leave or come into the country. According to this judge, electronic devices are a luxury. There's no reason why a lawyer or a member of the media need to have a computer or anything else that would store anything confidential when they travel. This recent decision reaches the polar opposite result from the decision in March 2013 from the federal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which ruled that the government must have reasonable suspicion of criminal activity before conducting a forensic search of your electronic device at the border. Catherine Crump, the ACLU attorney who is litigating the case, bluntly says there is no silver lining to this decision. The recent New York decision maintains the status quo. This means that if you are traveling internationally from a state governed by the Ninth Circuit, that is California, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, Arizona, or Nevada, you and your electronic devices have some rights. However, anywhere else in the country, you don't. Welcome to America in 2014. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
Packers.
Vikings.
We come from different places.
Uptown.
Downtown.
We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full.
But when we live united, we make a real difference in the building blocks of life. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly so do our communities. Real change won't happen without you.
Live united.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. According to a new poll from Quinnipiac University, Americans support raising the minimum wage by 71 to 27%. The poll also finds Americans support extending unemployment benefits by 58 to 37%. 51% of people polled think the minimum wage should be raised to $10.10 an hour or higher. Consideration is underway in the U.S. Senate right now to extend jobless benefits by 3 months. A new Americans United for Change national ad features some workers who are losing their unemployment benefits.
I lost my job probably about 6-7 months ago.
I'm a year short of being qualifying for my retirement.
They had some cutbacks. I was the most skilled technician and also the highest paid. My retirement is going away as a result of this.
I do have a husband, thank God, or I would be homeless.
Tell Republicans restore unemployment benefits now.
I was completely blown away by how many signatures we've gotten.
A Change.org petition launched by an anonymous Staples worker has gathered more than 166,000 signatures calling on Staples to stop dodging legal requirements of the Affordable Care Act by cutting part-time hours of its workers. A worker using the pseudonym Sue Whistleblower worked for years between 30 and 35 hours a week at Staples, but starting last month, Sue and other Staples workers had their hours cut back to just 25 hours a week with no exceptions. Sue believes that Staples did it to avoid having to provide health insurance coverage to the workers under the Affordable Care Act.
I just want to thank the folks that have signed our petition at change.org. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. This is definitely sending a clear message that Staples and other companies like this cannot abuse their workers and abuse loopholes just because they can and just to save money. And hopefully we will send a clear message. If they abuse their employees, people will take their money elsewhere.
Sue says the Affordable Care Act is working despite efforts by Staples and others to sabotage it.
As convoluted as the process was, it worked, and I'm hoping to get my new insurance cards here shortly.
Public employees in New York City are entering new contract talks feeling no longer demonized by the mayor. New Mayor Bill de Blasio is perceived as being much more worker-friendly than multi-billionaire Mike Bloomberg was. The unions in New York City say that a whole different tone is being set by the new mayor. The unions told New York City's labor press that the union-city relationship is going to be reset based on honesty, respect, and a shared commitment to making the city work. The 300,000 New York City public workers haven't had raises in years. The unions estimate city workers have lost a combined total of $6 to $7 billion. Nobody is expecting the contract talks to be easy, but the unions believe that the new de Blasio administration will be an effective and progressive one that respects workers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act radio studios in Washington, D.C. Heard live across the nation, this is Take Action News with Carl Frisch.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
This is Richard Eskow, and it's time for Take Action News here on We Act Radio. Thank you for joining us on this, our second week, taking the helm over from the worthy Carl Frisch, and before that, David Shuster. We are glad to welcome you to a very interesting show today. Obviously, this week, a lot of attention has been paid to Mr. Chris Christie, governor of New Jersey, and his controversies and problems. But while we will get to that story in the second hour today, let's remember, the world doesn't revolve around personalities. It doesn't revolve around Chris Christie. It doesn't even just revolve around presidential races. You know, presidential races in this country serve a kind of symbolic purpose. They tend to allow us to embody our feelings about ourselves, our society, our politics in an individual, a human being. So we invest a lot in them beyond the policy issues, beyond the politics. We want our president to be a hero. We want our president to be, in some cases, an extension of ourselves or the selves we'd like to be. So we focus every year, not just on presidential election years, on presidential politics. And let's face it, Chris Christie is hard not to focus on because it's a great story. It's a great story, not in a good way, but in a compelling, a kind of wreck on the highway sort of way. And of course, it also has intrinsic importance. We'll get to that as well, because while people talk about Chris Christie as a different kind of Republican from those we've been seeing in recent years. We'll talk about that in the second hour commentary too. But again, presidential politics, whether it's Hillary and her challengers on the Democratic side or Chris Christie versus Rand Paul versus Paul Ryan on the Republican side, they're not all that's up. They're certainly not all that's up this year. So a little later in this hour, we'll talk to Roger Hickey of the Campaign for America's Future about battles we may be seeing in the progressive world in the policy area, as well as the 2014 elections, which, reminder, are not presidential, they're congressional. We'll also be talking with Lindsay Beyerstein, who's a great writer, journalist, and commentator whose work I follow closely. Lindsay wrote a great story about the abortion battle, which at times, of course, becomes tragically a violent battle, and one doctor's efforts to fight it on the borders of Texas. So we will be speaking with Lindsay, and we'll also be speaking with Professor Lawrence Lessig, because this last year had marked a kind of tragic anniversary, which is, I should say, this last week, which is the death of Aaron Swartz, the brilliant computer scientist, hacker, thinker, polymath, who was involved in the creation of Reddit, who built and walked away from companies at a very young age, but who, more than that, brought a humanity to the act of expanding technology, a humanity, a progressivism, a sensitivity. And last week marked the 1-year anniversary of Aaron's death by suicide after being hounded for months on what I would consider a prosecutorial witch hunt over his downloading of information. Now, there are legitimate arguments to be made on either side of the copyright issue, either side of the information sharing issue. But what happened to Aaron Swartz was unforgivable. He was accused of a major crime, as if he had broken and entered into a bank and robbed the vault, when he did nothing of the kind. He was an idealistic young person. One of the interesting things that came up in the aftermath of 9/11 was, how well do you know somebody? Do you really know somebody? And that came up because a sociologist wrote a paper on it, because people kept saying, well, I think I knew somebody who died there. Well, I did. I spent a lot of my professional life working, meeting with people and organizations in the World Trade Center. I had a permanent pass to enter the World Trade Center. So I read the story with a lot of interest. I lost some people that day. But did I know Aaron? Well, it's an interesting thing. He and I were on some online bulletin boards and discussion groups together. We certainly had a few exchanges. We never met. In this technological world, it's hard to say whether I knew him or not. But this week, as I was preparing for this week's show, I had a little technical problem, with the merging of my mail contacts between two different, between my iPhone. It's a long story. But anyway, in merging these contacts, it suddenly started to generate massive duplicates. And when I went to pull my notes together about the life and the work and the death of Aaron Swartz, his name came up 99 times in my directory. So we certainly emailed, we certainly communicated, but no, I can't say I know him. I just know that the world is worse off without him, and more positively, was better off because he was among us. He was a sensitive being, he was a brilliant being, he was somebody who could have contributed a lot more and was taken away from us too soon. But we'll spend a few minutes with Professor Lawrence Lessig, who has been another brilliant voice for the humanizing side of technology. We'll spend a few minutes with Dr. Lessig this hour talking about Aaron Swartz and making sure that in the stories of Bridgegate or Bridge Ghazi or whatever you want to call it, and the other things that occupy our attention, we don't forget the life and the death of a brilliant man who contributed so much to us. And then in subsequent hours, in hour two, we'll talk a little bit more about Mr. Christie. I will. We'll talk about tax justice. We'll be talking with Michael Hiltzig of the Los Angeles Times, who wrote a brilliant column, and we'll be talking about the TPP, which is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a new trade agreement which would give even more draconian powers to those who would rule us in the name of global trade. That's hour two, and then in hour three, we'll be talking with Rashad Robinson from Color of Change about what can only be described, if slightly awkwardly, as the reintegration of Saturday Night Live with the addition of a woman of color to the cast. We'll be talking with the good folks at the Progressive Congressional Change Committee about their strategies for the year, and we will be talking about media strategies for coming out. So that is our time. I am looking for a time check here right now, but I think we've got about 30 seconds to go, and in those 30 seconds I want to tell you that once again, we here at, you know what, hey, I just want to brag on myself a little bit. I just sent a little quick email saying how much time do I have left. I have 30 seconds. How's that? You never lose that. So we promise good timing, good information, and more news up ahead right here on Take Action News. I'm RJ Eskow.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Sergeant Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Friends, David Shuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
And we are back on Take Action News. Our guest for this segment is Roger Hickey, co-director of the Campaign for America's Future, where, in the interest of full disclosure, I note that I am a senior fellow. Roger, thanks so much for coming on.
Richard, it's great to be on your new program. I've followed We Act closely, and it's great to have you as part of the people who run the place. Let me hijack the program for a second and tell the audience that they ought to check out Richard's blogging on ourfuture.org and on Huffington Post, and especially to cite a timely topic, his piece on Chris Christie, the real face of the Republican Party, is all over the internet today. So check it out and check out his great blogging. Little commercial there.
Well, we have very strict rules that every guest must promote me for the first 30 seconds of their appearance. Thank you for that, Roger. Hey, Roger, you and I get the opportunity to talk a lot about politics and strategy and the progressive movement. It's one of the things I enjoy about Campaign for America's Future, our routine calls where we all get together and brainstorm on this stuff. But there were a couple of things I wanted to explore with you today while we're still in the early part of the year. I think sometimes when you're a progressive, you feel as if you're suffering from ADD, which I think I do, but which I'm told I do, by the way. But there's just so much going on. There's trade issues, and there are minimum wage issues. There are inequality issues. There's an election coming up for Congress. There are mobilization issues and minimum wage, on and on and on. They're all worthy. They're all important. What should people, in your estimation, really be focusing on? We don't often get a chance to think big picture, but we got a year coming ahead. How should members of the audience be thinking about making an impact in the year to come?
Well, I think economic issues are the key. That's what we do at the Campaign for America's Future, because if you don't have a functioning economy, if you don't have an inclusive economy, you can't build a coalition for change. But I would say that I'm somewhat optimistic because the media is starting to see that it all adds up. All of the various issues that you just mentioned add up in the minds of the press now to a new populist force in American politics and American life. And that new populism, the fact that it's being talked about, means that all of the work that we've been doing on economic issues and on inclusivity in American life is starting to add up to something approximating a movement for change. Populism has a pretty distinguished history in American politics. It's the little guys getting together against the big guys, and everything that we've worked on the Campaign for America's Future is now starting to have some impact. We can now talk about expanding Social Security instead of cutting Social Security. We're going to have a big debate about trade policy and whether this new trade treaty is good for jobs in America. We've got a real debate about inequality and what should we be doing to reduce inequality. We're even winning elections on this issue, like in New York. So I think it's part of our job to keep on working on the issues that we are closest to, but to make sure that it adds up to fleshing out a new populist agenda, and we take that to our friends and neighbors as well.
So I think it's a great summation, but I think, let's say I'm not you or me or someone who does this every day, but I'm a citizen, I'm concerned, I'm involved, I vote for and support politicians, and sometimes they disappoint me, sometimes they get in office and do things I wouldn't have had them do. What do I do to to remind myself that, because I think you're right. I think this was a surprisingly good year in many ways in 2013, and I'm not known for being, overly sunny in my disposition about these things, but I do think it was a good year. What do I do as I look forward to an election year, A, to make sure that the people I vote for represent me, B, once they get elected, that they keep on representing me, and C, that I let them hear from me on the issues that matter to me?
Yeah, well, the important thing, first of all, is to work on the issues that matter to you in your community, trying to build strategies for power and change around the things that you really either piss you off or inspire you. But I think we've learned a lot about politicians, even about politicians that we were once in love with, that it's really important in that period before elections to pin them down, to show, Barack Obama won because we organized an anti-war movement, among other things, that was against the Iraq War. We should have pinned him down about future empire building around the world. We should have pinned him down about whether or not he really believed in cutting Social Security benefits or not. This is the period of time where the public has this period before the elections coming up, where the public has maximum leverage on the politicians. And we ought to be working on a list of issues that we want the politicians to tell us where they stand and what they're going to do if we give them our votes. And we've also got to keep on building independent power bases so that once politicians get in office, they have to face organized citizens who are going to hold their feet to the fire, not just cross their fingers and hoping that the politicians will do the right thing, but a movement for change that goes to work every day, no matter who's been elected, to try to force change on the political system.
Well, that's a good explanation. I think that should work for us. And I guess the last piece of it is that's the electoral strategy. Mm-hmm. But then, we're constantly being reminded, and rightfully, that our vision of the future, our vision of the society we want to shape, shouldn't be limited by the conventional wisdom or the elites' definition of what's possible. I mean, that's how we shifted the conversation, for example, from Social Security cutting to expanding Social Security. But even that is a start. How do people help build a movement that doesn't just insist that people who run on liberal platforms execute a liberal agenda, but really push the window, as they say, the Overton window, as the political scientists say, so that we have an aggressive and bold vision for a society that's as much more progressive as today's as FDR's was to Herbert Hoover's. Any thoughts on that?
Well, we've got to get together in public gatherings that we run. We do an annual conference called Take Back America, but we've also got to build coalitions that are around big issues like, we really need a coalition working on full employment. Like, everybody in America ought to have a job, and if they don't have a job, they ought to have a decent income. And that simple proposition, everybody ought to have a job or an income. It's a slogan that goes back to the '60s and way before that, but then you're not just talking about, well, there's a marginal decrease or increase in the unemployment rate. It's you've got a big touchstone, full employment, jobs for everybody, opportunity for all, that you're judging every news story and every political move by. And we shouldn't just be for the Obamacare healthcare legislation. We ought to be building an ongoing vision of what a real healthcare system ought to look like, and we can learn a lot from other countries. And we need to be sharing that with each other, and as you say, not having all of our organizing be focused just on telling the politicians what they ought to do, but conjuring up the kind of society that America should be and ought to be, and with the resources that we have, really could be. That's the other thing that we've got to pound on, is this is a rich country. It is a truly rich country. And so many of the conservatives are trying to get us to buy the idea that, well, we don't have enough money for anything. We've got to teach people to accept a lesser standard of living. That is bull. That is absolutely bull. This is the most rich country in the world. We all ought to be able to have a decent standard of living, a decent employment.
Well, I'm going to have to jump in there, but Roger, we're out of time, and thank you so much for that. I think that summarized it perfectly. And thanks for coming and joining with us on Take Action News.
You're listening to Take Action News on We Act Radio, produced at the studios of WPWC 1480 AM in Washington, D.C., your nation's capital.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away. And after a couple of weeks, I went to my doctor.
A sore, lump, or thick patch in your mouth or throat could be a symptom of oral cancer.
My doctor told me I was smart to come in. He said that oral cancer is more common in African American men than in any other group in the U.S. It turns out I did have oral cancer, but it was caught early and my treatment was successful. I'm glad I got it checked. That probably saved my life.
If you're an African American man, you need to know about oral cancer. Visit a doctor or dentist if you see changes in your mouth that don't go away after 2 weeks. It's important to get an oral cancer exam, because if you do have cancer, the earlier it's caught, the better. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
You know, this used to be a good neighborhood. Now it's a mess. You got all these polyps running around. Stick it in the devil.
Colon cancer almost always starts with a polyp. Get the polyp early and stop colon cancer before it even starts.
Where do you think you were running to, huh?
I didn't even see you guys there. Get the test, get the polyp.
I want to talk to my lawyer!
Get the cure.
I got a phone call! CD is for everybody, not just for the few. Anyone can share VD with someone nice as you.
If you're curious or confused, get information or a pamphlet at most pharmacies or a health clinic. If you need help, see a doctor.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
And we are back on Take Action News. This is RJ Eskow, and we are bringing you the news that matters, the news you need to know, and the news you might not know, including the story of a reproductive services battle in Harlingen, Texas. And there was a great piece about that from someone I haven't talked with in a long time. I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say about her terrific story for Al Jazeera News. Lindsay Beyerstein is with us. Lindsay, are you here?
I sure am. Hi, RJ.
Hi, nice. Thanks so much for joining us. Listen, I really wanted to have you on because I thought your story about the abortion battle on the Texas border was so helpful and so informative, and I think a dimension of our struggle. So, and I think you did a great job. Nation Institute did a great job in funding that work. Could you tell us a little bit? We mind giving us a brief rundown of your Texas story?
Sure. Thanks for that intro. Basically, the Rio Grande Valley of Texas is very far south Texas, walking distance from the Mexico border, and it's home to about 1.3 million people, most of whom are Latino, very poor area of the country. And before HB2, the Texas abortion law, there were 2 clinics serving that very large population in an area about the size of Connecticut. There was Whole Women's Health McAllen, and there was Reproductive Services of Harlingen. And since the law came into effect, one of the most crippling provisos was the fact that doctors who perform abortions in clinics have to have admitting privileges at a local hospital within 30 miles of their clinic. And that put both of those businesses effectively out of the abortion business overnight.
And you talked to a Dr. Lester Minto, I believe his name is.
I did, yes.
And now he sounded like, among other things, a very charismatic and engaging character, but he was he ran one of those 2 clinics, and what's his situation now? He carries a gun, and what's going on with him?
Well, that's a long time thing, the carrying the 45 and the bulletproof vest, just because of the protesters that have been kind of a constant nuisance at his clinic for years. There hasn't been any recent violence or anything like that, but basically he's determined that he's not going anywhere. He's not allowed to formally perform surgical abortions anymore because of the law. He can't get hospital privileges. So what he's decided to do instead to keep on helping women is to just let people know, kind of by the by, that there are other ways of dealing with this problem. And what he's alluding to, and what's been common knowledge among women in the Valley for decades now, is that there's a drug called misoprostol. It's a drug that's normally used to treat ulcers. It's very common in pharmacies all over the place, but it's available without a prescription over the counter at pharmacies in Mexico. You just walk over the bridge in some cases and buy it. No questions asked. I went and tried to do it myself and did. I bought a package of misoprostol tablets for $38.50 at a pharmacy in a little town in Mexico and walked back to the U.S. border, showed it to the border guard on my way back in. Nobody asked me any questions. You can also buy these drugs if you know the right people at flea markets in the Valley. And women have been using them to regulate their fertility, to bring down their periods in early pregnancy for many years now, and it's kind of become part of the culture. And so he just kind of reminds people that there are these ways of obtaining these drugs that sometimes people use. And he believes that he's complying with the law because once a woman shows up at a medical facility and she's bleeding, a doctor can complete her miscarriage, and doctor has to complete her miscarriage. It's medically necessary when someone's bleeding like that. So essentially he's moved from being a surgical abortion provider to working as a kind of miscarriage management consultant.
But let's I mean, that's a tragic description of a job description, first of all, and secondly, the idea of going to Mexico. But let's talk a little bit about that law, because you're telling me there's a law that makes it essentially impossible for women in the lower Rio Grande Valley to get abortions. I thought the Supreme Court legalized abortion. What am I missing?
But ever since 1992, the Supreme Court found that the state could restrict abortion in various ways as long as it didn't place what it called an undue burden on a woman's ability to access their right to have an abortion. And in the years since Casey, there's been all this legislation to try and hash out what undue burden means, and it means the standard has gotten higher and higher and higher as to what counts as an undue burden. Waiting periods are not considered to be an undue burden. Medically inaccurate spiels about abortion and breast cancer or abortion and suicide that you have to listen to before getting your procedure, not considered an undue burden. And right now, before the Fifth Circuit, the judges are giving Planned Parenthood lawyers a hard time about whether having to drive 240 miles to San Antonio, brave a border checkpoint, possibly have to go all the way to Houston, whether that would be an undue burden.
Well, and then apparently there's some school of thought that suggests that going to Mexico to buy a drug or suffering a miscarriage is not an undue burden. If I understand the way people are enforcing this Texas law or the realities of it there, I guess as a final question, Lindsay, let me just ask you, what can people do if people are concerned about a story like this? If people are appalled about the need to travel to Mexico or the miscarriage management school of pregnancy care and so on. What can people do about this?
There's some very hardworking charities that are working as abortion access funds. One of them is called the Lilith Fund. I interviewed some of the staffers over there for the story, talking about the work they do. Giving women cash grants with pre-approved at abortion clinics to get discounts. There's another group called Fund Texas Women. They have a website. They're working on logistical issues to help women obtain abortions. They can also write to, especially if you live in Texas, write to your state legislators. Right, to your federal legislators, your congressmen, your senators, really anyone to just raise awareness about what's going on and the ways in which reproductive freedom is being chipped away, the way in which the courts are cheapening the legacy of these great Supreme Court decisions that established a woman's right to choose.
Well, that's great advice. And I guess last question for you, are you working on a news story now that we'd like to know about or that you're able to talk about?
I'm staying on this beat of self-abortion in the lower Rio Grande Valley. I think that there's a lot there that people don't know yet and that hasn't been documented yet, and I'm going to be sticking with this until we really get answers about what women need and what can be done best to help them.
Well, Lindsay Beyerstein, where can people go to see the bulk of your work or blogging or past writings?
You can visit me. I am a staff writer at These Times. You can visit my blog, duly noted at These Times. And also you can visit the blog of the Sidney Hillman Foundation. It's called Clear It with Sidney. And I am also a co-host of a podcast called Point of Inquiry for the Center for Inquiry. Every other week I interview people on skeptical and secular topics. So you can check out the Point of Inquiry website to hear my latest broadcasts.
Okay, well, Lindsay, thanks so much for coming on with us. It's a great story. Stay on it. Please keep us posted and come back when you have more to report for us, okay?
Thanks so much.
You bet. That was Lindsay Beyerstein giving us a story on her work in the lower Rio Grande Valley on access to abortion. We're in an interesting mode now where we have states passing laws that essentially overrule rulings of the Supreme Court, and we'll be staying on this in the weeks and months to come. And we'll be back in a few minutes. Stay with us on Take Action News.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away.
Education beyond high school. A path to opportunity and success for our young people. And the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream. Because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are Federal Student Aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentaid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
This is Richard Eskow, RJ Eskow, and we are back on Take Action News. Our next guest is Lawrence Lessig. Lawrence Lessig is director of the Edmund J. Safra Center for Ethics at Harvard University and a professor of law at Harvard Law School. He has a fascinating background at the Center for Internet and Society, where he was a founder and as a founding board member of Creative Commons, a number of other qualifications as well that would use up the entire segment. And I really wanted to talk to Professor Lessig today, though, because tomorrow, I believe it is, marks the one-year anniversary of the passing of Aaron Swartz. And I wrote about Aaron's death. Professor Lessig, who knew him well, wrote at length about it, and I wanted to make sure, number one, that Aaron was remembered this week, and number two, that we keep the causes that Aaron fought for going. So, Professor Lessig, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, I'm very glad to be here with you.
So, first of all, I understand that I recall very well that you engaged quite a bit in the issue of Aaron's death. And before we reflect a little bit on Aaron personally, I want to talk about a little bit about the circumstances prior to and leading up to his death. He was the subject of a prosecutorial, what I described as a prosecutorial vendetta. Do you think that was a fair characterization on my part?
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much against him, but it's against a certain, hacker class who the government is either unwilling or incapable of making obvious distinctions between people who are out there doing real harm, stealing credit card data and identities, and people who are out there trying to do good. And whether you believe or agree with what Aaron did or not, nobody could believe that what he was doing was trying to do harm. And the failure of the government to see that distinction is really what's extraordinary about the prosecution.
Well, you said the government is either incapable or unwilling. Based on your review of the case that they had put together and the public statements they have made, I suspect you may have a theory about whether it was inability or unwillingness on their part. Do you? And what are your thoughts on that?
I think it was just unwillingness. I think what happens is, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Boston has their own computer crimes division. And as people who know the office say, they've just got too many lawyers. They got too many people for the amount of computer crime there is to prosecute. So I think that when this case came across their desk, they were more interested in demonstrating the extraordinary power of their computer crimes division than they were in thinking about what the ultimate and real justice here is. And that's, obviously wrong, and it turned out to be tragic given what happened after that decision.
Well, I tend to think of these events, and then we'll pivot to another topic, but I want your thoughts, if I may. I tend to interpret events like these in the context of economic and social forces, and I know there's a fair amount of back and forth between prosecutors in the copyright and technology areas and private firms representing corporations in the copyright and technology areas. Could it be that one or more prosecutors wanted to prove their bona fides in this area for career reasons, either within or government or outside of government, and that may have led to a culture, rather than singling out individuals, a culture in which one is encouraged to make an example of someone like Aaron?
I don't think that there, was a career objective beyond just being a successful prosecutor. I think the problem is what it means to be a successful prosecutor isn't necessarily connected to the conceptions of justice and proportionality that most Americans have. So, being the tough guy, having a press conference, as the U.S. Attorney did when the case was announced, threatening up to 35 years in prison for the crime which Aaron committed, that's the kind of fraternity-like attitude that the U.S. Attorney's Office displayed in this case that I think ultimately was so consequential in leading to the tragic result.
Aaron was in my impression, you knew him far better than I, was a sensitive human being and a talented human being and a committed human being. And one of the things that was so admirable about him was that he really wanted to bring a humanity to technology and to the discussion of technology. And my feeling has always been that contributed in some way to the outcome. I don't want to speculate about that. I will tell you that what came to mind when I heard of his death was the line that was used when the Rolling Stones were prosecuted in 1967 in the London Times, and they quoted an old author who had said, "Who breaks a butterfly on a wheel?" I thought it was tragic and a terrible loss, and my understanding is that you're doing something in New Hampshire tomorrow to commemorate a cause that both you and Aaron shared. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, well, one of the things that always surprises people about Aaron is how many different wars he was fighting. He had an incredible ability to recruit people for causes and to encourage them and set them in a direction and get them going. 7 years ago, he came to Berlin, where I was for the year, and we met and talked about what we each were doing. And he very passionately, very strongly argued that I was wasting my time working on internet and copyright issues because we weren't going to make any progress there unless we made progress on this underlying system of corruption and the way our government works. And his point was this was the more important fundamental issue to be working on. And he really kind of shamed me into recognizing that indeed is what I should be doing. So that summer I announced I was stopping the work I was doing on intellectual property and on intellectual and then internet policy, and I was going to shift my work to this corruption field. Well, He and I think, expected there would be a day when together we would be working on this. He helped start the first group that I founded, which was called Change Congress at the time. He was on the board and a key technical resource. But obviously, after what happened a year ago, this is work we have to continue on our own. So what we decided to do was to try to commemorate both Aaron and another extraordinary soul who's from New Hampshire, a woman named Granny D. So Granny D, who died 4 years ago, just after Citizens United was decided, 15 years ago, on January 1st, 1999, began an extraordinary walk from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. At the age of 88, she made the 3,000-plus mile walk. Took her 13 months. She arrived when she was 90. And on her chest was a sign that said Campaign Finance Reform. And she really represents, even to this day, in New Hampshire, a critical movement that has continually pushed for better, more responsive democracy. So we decided we're going to do a march. We're going to continue Granny D's march. We're going to start it on the day that Aaron Swartz died, and it will end on the day that Granny D was born. So January 11th it begins in Dixville Notch, which is where the first presidential votes will be cast in the 2016 primary. And it will end on the 24th in Nashua, where we'll have a birthday celebration celebrating Granny D's birth. And along the way, we're going to be recruiting people to the cause that Aaron recruited me to 7 years ago, because we believe that New Hampshire has the chance, really has the opportunity to change the game in the way that American politics works. If only citizens in New Hampshire take the responsibility to turn the tables on the candidates and say, hey, this is what I want to talk about. This is what I want to hear you talk about. So what are you going to do to solve the system of corruption in Washington?
There are a couple things fascinating about that, and I'd love to talk to you more about that sometime, maybe when you're done walking and need to sit down and maybe spend some time on the phone. But I guess last question for you, where can people go if they're not able to show up to march with you, walk with you? Where can people go to learn more about your work, which was also Aaron's work, support it, and educate themselves on these issues?
Well, the best thing is to go to the New Hampshire Rebellion site. You can see, and you're going to be able to follow the walk, and we're going to have a lot of updating of video and images as it happens. And that site is nhrebellion.org. And you can learn why we're doing it. You can see some videos that have been produced about what this is about, and you can give the support that we need. And the most important support that we need right now is to spread the word. We're organizing a pretty big thunderclap, which, as you know, is this technique to synchronize social media messaging. And if you go to bit.ly/thunder lowercase and then NHR uppercase, you can be taken to the thunderclap for this and join the 3 million plus circulation that will happen on Saturday at noon. But if you go to our website, just sharing this information with people is really critical, because this has got to be a grassroots movement.
Okay, well, we're out of time, and I'm going to encourage our folks to go to your website. I'll be following you guys myself, and best of luck in keeping up this great work, and what a wonderful way to honor Aaron. So thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM, broadcasting live from Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue in D.C.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
According to a new poll from Quinnipiac University, Americans support raising the minimum wage by 71 to 27%. The poll also finds Americans support extending unemployment benefits by 58 to 37%. 51% of people polled think the minimum wage should be raised to $10.10 an hour or higher. Consideration is underway in the U.S. Senate right now to extend jobless benefits by 3 months. A new Americans United for Change national ad features some workers who are losing their unemployment benefits.
I lost my job probably about 6-7 months ago.
I'm a year short of being qualifying for my retirement.
They had some cutbacks. I was the most skilled technician and also the highest paid. My retirement is going away as a result of this.
I do have a husband, thank God, or I would be homeless.
Tell Republicans restore unemployment benefits now.
I was completely blown away by how many signatures we've gotten.
A Change.org petition launched by an anonymous Staples worker has gathered more than 166,000 signatures calling on Staples to stop dodging legal requirements of the Affordable Care Act by cutting part-time hours of its workers. A worker using the pseudonym Sue Whistleblower worked for years between 30 and 35 hours a week at Staples, but starting last month, Sue and other Staples workers had their hours cut back to just 25 hours a week with no exceptions. Sue believes that Staples did it to avoid having to provide health insurance coverage to the workers under the Affordable Care Act.
I just want to thank the folks that have signed our petition at Change.org. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. This is definitely sending a clear message that Staples and other companies like this cannot abuse their workers and abuse loopholes just because they can and just to save money. And hopefully we will send a clear message. If they abuse their employees, people will take their money elsewhere.
Sue says the Affordable Care Act is working, despite efforts by Staples and others to sabotage it.
As convoluted as the process was, it worked, and I'm hoping to get my new insurance cards here shortly.
Public employees in New York City are entering new contract talks, feeling no longer demonized by the mayor. New Mayor Bill de Blasio is perceived as being much more worker-friendly than multi-billionaire Mike Bloomberg was. The unions in New York City say that a whole different tone is being set by the new mayor. The unions told New York City's labor press that the union-city relationship is going to be reset based on honesty, respect, and a shared commitment to making the city work. The 300,000 New York City public workers haven't had raises in years. The unions estimate city workers have lost a combined total of $6 to $7 billion. Nobody is expecting the contract talks to be easy, but the unions believe that the new de Blasio administration will be an effective and progressive one that respects workers.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Over 13 million people are affected by famine, war, and drought in the Horn of Africa. Unfortunately, just listening to this commercial won't help them. Just listening won't give them their next meal or shelter or hope. You can help by texting GIVE to 777-444 to donate $10 and by going to usaid.gov/FWD to forward the facts. Brought to you by the Ad Council and USAID. Text donations go directly to Consortium of Humanitarian Relief Organizations. Standard text and data rates apply.
For generations, picture takers have instructed their subjects to say cheese. Well, no people say cheese better than Wisconsinites, who unabashedly wear cheesehead hats in public, celebrate dozens of cheese festivals, have a Monterey Jack bacterium as the state's official microbe, and generally honor the milk curd as a deity. So naturally, Wisconsin would be the state to come up with the idea of spraying its city streets with cheese brine. This is not some sort of cheesy tourist promotion, but an actual attempt to have two problems blend into one clever solution. Problem number one is ice. Wisconsin gets lots of it, with Milwaukee alone averaging more than 4 feet of snow each winter and spending some $10 million a year to apply rock salt to clear its frozen streets. Not only is that a lot of money, but about 30% of the dry salt bounces off the roadways and pollutes waterways. Problem number two is cheese brine. It's a waste product from cheese making, And this state produces nearly 3 billion pounds of cheese a year, so it has lots of brine. It costs a typical dairy farmer thousands of dollars each year to dispose of it. But this winter, farmers are donating their waste problem to cities like Milwaukee, which are hauling the brine to their road maintenance facilities and blending it into the rock salt. The idea is to create a mixture with just the right stickiness to keep the salt from bouncing away. You want to use provolone or mozzarella, says a Milwaukee Public Works manager. Those have the best salt content. You have to do practically nothing to it. This is Jim Hightower saying, voila, 2 messes equal a neat solution. Wisconsin officials still consider their cheese-coated streets an experiment, but it seems to be working out just fine. And it's just one example of a myriad of innovative alternatives being produced by local governments all across our country.
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act Radio studios in Washington, D.C., heard live across the nation, this is Take Action News with Carl Frisch.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
And we are back on Take Action News. And Mr. President, we're still waiting for that action. We look forward to it with great enthusiasm. Now is the time when I promised you some more thoughts on Chris Christie. And we'll try to be as good as our word here on Take Action News. But let me tell you, I'm already sick of the guy. And if he really does wind up being the candidate, that's going to make it a rough couple years for me. But look, there's probably very few people within the sound of my voice who don't know what's going on with Chris Christie, that a couple people on his staff organized horrendous traffic backups in Fort Lee, New Jersey. Now, if you don't know the area well, you may not know. It's always horrible there. But what we're really talking about is hours in which an entire small town was gridlocked. Kids were stuck in their school buses. A 91-year-old woman, or ambulance wasn't able to reach her. There were other delayed first responders. I mean, just catastrophic, tragic. And as it turns out, this was apparently an act of political vengeance, probably against the mayor of Fort Lee, although there are other stories or other theories, but that appears to be the most plausible one. And among other things, when someone said flippantly, "I feel badly for those kids in school buses," the answer was, and I paraphrase, "Don't, they're the children of Democratic voters, Buono voters." Mr. Christie's gubernatorial opponent was named Barbara Buono. So, we have not only, by all accounts, someone who is a bullying, nasty human being, and you don't need to go to conspiracy theories or email records for that. There are enough video clips of Chris Christie bullying teachers or bullying ordinary citizens who ask him legitimate questions. So the guy's a bully. There's no question about it. This was an act of bullying which somehow he claims he didn't know anything about. Now, those of us who are old enough to remember Watergate will have experienced a certain sense of deja vu at Mr. Christie's, Governor Christie's press conference yesterday. His stories didn't hang together. They don't add up. this guy has a history of using his office for political gain and for getting even and scorekeeping. So really none of this should be a surprise to anybody. The best case, the fantasy case, which is entirely implausible, but let's give it credence for a second, that the guy knew nothing about any of this. He hired all the people involved. And I don't believe he knew nothing. I personally don't believe that. I think the question now is a question for our journalistic and pundit class. Will they treat Chris Christie's ethical lapses, this one and others, including the misuse of his office when he was a federal prosecutor, to violate Justice Department guidelines and prosecute or claim he was about to prosecute a Democratic senatorial candidate right before an election? They're always told to avoid doing that because it interferes with the political process and or appears to. So the guy has a long, sleazy history. The question now is whether our pundit class will hold him to the kind of standard they would presumably hold a Democrat to, or whether they'll continue their adoration for him despite this. Now, I will say, look, I was interviewed by a reporter this morning. It's high pressure to be interviewed on tough, complex questions in real time. There's no question about it. I always think of that in terms of our guests and try to put them at ease. But that said, I have to say that Christie's press conference performance was extremely impressive. But a cat burglar's ability to pick a lock in 10 seconds is also extremely impressive. It doesn't make it admirable. So my attitude about Chris Christie is we know what the man is. My question now is, do we know if our journalistic class is willing to act like journalists and continue to investigate this story and pursue it wherever it may lead? Number one. Number two, are the elected officials in the state of New Jersey going to do their job and investigate it to the bitter end? I believe they will. It looks like they will. Number three, it will be very interesting to see what the local federal prosecutor plans to do with this, since there are potential crimes involved, how seriously he's going to take it. Now, there are those who suggest that Chris Christie's national career is toast. That may or may not be true. I certainly hope it's true. But look, the fact is that everybody said back in 1956 that Richard Nixon's political career was toast after he gave the Checkers speech, but the public bought the Checkers speech. Yesterday's the Checkers speech was one where, after Nixon had been accused of accepting gifts and bribes, he said, well, they did give us a little dog, which my children have named Checkers, and by gosh, we're keeping the dog because the kids love it, or words to that effect. Now, as far as I'm concerned, yesterday's press conference was Chris Christie's Checkers conference. We know what kind of human being Richard Nixon was. I believe we know what kind of human being Chris Christie is. The question is whether the people of New Jersey will have their questions answered for them, or whether, in fact, we will see Chris Christie as a viable presidential candidate in 2016. You can never count these guys out, especially with so much financial resource behind them and such a pliant press corps. So let's hope the press corps does its job. Look, if he is the candidate, they're going to tell us he's a different kind of Republican. But that's the point I made yesterday, which I guess last hour Roger Hickey pointed out. I wrote a piece called "The Real Face of the Republican Party is Chris Christie," and I believe that. I believe they will do anything to win. I believe they will do anything to crush their opponents. I believe that that party, which once represented a different, legitimate political point of view, is now a party of corporate expediency, and I believe nobody represents that more effectively than Chris Christie. So at the end of the day, I guess we'll see what happens to Chris Christie, but whether he falls or whether he somehow comes out on this, the Republican Party will be the same. The political process will continue to be corrupted by corporate money, which is what a lot of this is about, which is what Lawrence Lessig is marching across New Hampshire to end. And I believe these are the issues that we should be focusing on. the effect of money in politics, those politicians who pretend that they are offering something different but really offer more of the same, and the ugly face behind it. And I'll close with this. Everybody says that Chris Christie won a landslide election because he won 60% of the vote against 40% for his opponent. An increase in the minimum wage was also on the New Jersey ballot. That won by a similar margin without the dirty tricks, without the dirty politicking, without closing 3 lanes of the George Washington Bridge. So let's leave it at that. Without any of the corporate money behind it, the people of New Jersey wanted an increase to the minimum wage at least as much as they wanted Chris Christie. We'll be right back.
Our children are exposed to violence every day, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
100% success rate in modifying your home. Free consultations at 2%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-995-HOPE or visit HUD.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/Guard Reserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Friends, David Shuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C. We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org. Or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
And we are back, I believe, on Take Action News. This is RJ Eskow, and our next guest is Phil Aronow. He is campaign director of the environmental group 350.org. No, I'm apparently told he is not our next guest. Okay, this is switcheroo. Okay, sorry about that. Our next guest is Michael Hiltzik. He is a business columnist for the Los Angeles Times. He has been kind enough to have me on his podcast, and now I'm grateful to him for returning the favor. Michael, thank you so much for being with us. This is our second Shakedown cruise, but Michael, you wrote a terrific piece. Well, a lot of your work is terrific, but you wrote a terrific piece the other day. I think it was on the second day of the new year, January 2nd, and the headline was "Meet the People Who Have Already Paid Their 2014 Social Security Tax." And do you mind just taking 30 seconds or so and telling us about that piece?
Oh, sure. Well, first I should tip my hat to Teresa Goarducci over at the New School, who is
that. So, and just to reiterate for our audience, because it can be a complicated topic, Social Security tax is taken out of the first. It's the figure changes according to inflation and so on, but it's taken out of roughly the first $117,000 of income, which means that the vast majority of Americans pay Social Security tax on all their income. But if you earn more than that, then the amount you earn over that amount isn't taxed for Social Security. And yet it seems that virtually all of the people, if not all of the people telling us that we need to cut Social Security benefits, virtually all of them are in that category. So I think that was one of the points you were making. And look, this payroll tax cap, as it's called, was established a while back. And I guess one point I'd like to get your thoughts on is that it was established, or the new funding structure was established in the early 1980s. But one of the things that changed between the early 1980s and today is that the extremely wealthy are capturing a much larger percentage of our national income than they were before. And that means that a smaller percentage of our national income is going to fund Social Security. Is that one, do you agree with that conclusion? And two, what should we do about that?
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. It's not merely speculation. We know this from the real numbers. The payroll tax was established, of course, when Social Security was created in 1935, and at the outset, when it was 1% and 1%.
with you, but the counter argument that I experience, and by the way, if people are interested in knowing more about it, the economist L. Josh Bivens, among others, has studied this issue of wage inequality and what it's done to Social Security. But the counter argument that I've received, and I'm sure you've heard too, is that benefits are tied to the taxation level and also capped. Would you then remove the cap on the benefits, or would you make it more liberal? How would you handle that?
Well, I think that that's a reasonable objection, and I think
Michael, I want to ask you about one other area, which is numbers aside, and there are multiple proposals, but something that's interesting, and we have 1 minute left, the politics changed in the last year, in my opinion. The public debate shifted from cutting Social Security to, especially with Elizabeth Warren's endorsement of the idea, expanding Social Security, as the Harkin bill would do. Were you surprised by that? With 30 seconds, were you surprised by that?
Well, I'm gratified.
Forms of investment have disappeared. Social Security, for a lot of people, is all they got. Michael Hiltzik from the Los Angeles Times, thanks so much for being with us on Take Action News.
It's my pleasure.
And we will be right back.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Say you want to go to college.
Yay!
A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East.
Go Red Wolves!
Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Hello, my name is Jim Gray, and I am a judge of the Superior Court in California and a former federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. I would like to talk to you for a moment about marijuana. Did you know that since the federal government first banned marijuana in 1937, usage in this country has actually gone up by about 4,000%? Or did you know that in the Netherlands, where adults are allowed to possess small amounts of marijuana and buy it from government-regulated businesses, fewer adults and fewer teenagers smoke marijuana than here in our country? Or that an American is arrested on marijuana charges every 38 seconds? If you are wondering if any of this makes sense, you are not alone. To find out more, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thank you, and good luck to us all.
And we are back on Take Action News. I'm RJ Eskow. Thanks for sticking with us. We've got a lot more to come. Our next guest is Phil Arano of 350.org, the environmental organization, here to talk to us about that cryptic three-letter proposal known as TPP. Phil, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Listen, you guys are well known for your work in the environmental area, and I and others I work with have certainly been following the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the new proposed trade deal, to the extent that it's possible to follow it, because there's been a great deal of secrecy about it. But you've been looking at this from this possible deal from the environmental angle, and I gather you have some concerns, and I was wondering if you could tell us about that.
Absolutely. So yeah, we were involved with the the Trans-Pacific Partnership campaign for a while now, and the reason we're involved is because many of the same provisions that would hurt worker safety, boost corporate power, and trample on human rights would also trash the environment. Some of these things, like the ability of corporations to sue municipalities, states, and national governments over environmental and safety regulations, would actually make our country and other countries around the world where we work, since we're a global organization, much more dangerous when it comes to burning fossil fuels. It would also increase the amount of carbon that would be flowing into the atmosphere, because it would increase exports of things like fracked natural gas and coal.
So let me put this into a little bit of context for our listeners. Trans-Pacific Partnership is a new trade deal that's being negotiated in secret. Representatives, by the way, from over 600 corporate interests have been allowed to see it. The public, most members of Congress have not. Now they're trying to do something called fast tracking. Well, there'll be a very short period of time, no real time to debate it. And if it goes into effect, one of its provisions is that, in effect, it overrides the ability, the sovereign rights of nations to regulate things like their environmental laws. I've written about its impact on things like food safety or other issues. But I think what you're telling me, and I want to clarify this, is that this law, if passed, and we enter into this trade agreement, Americans would lose their right, and other members of this treaty, other signatories would lose their right as individual nations to regulate their environmental interests without the consent of these other organizations, these other entities, and in doing that, would potentially become much greater polluters even than they are today, and would certainly lose their ability to restrict the environmental harm they cause. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, this isn't theoretical. NAFTA is a great example of the kinds of laws that would be put into place if the Trans-Pacific Partnership would be passed. You know, there's an example for, just as one example, Lone Pine Resources, a fracking company, is using NAFTA to sue the Canadian government over a fracking moratorium that they say impedes their right to drill under the St. Lawrence River. So this isn't just theoretical. This is already happening under NAFTA. The Trans-Pacific Partnership would take some of those laws, those same secret tribunals where these decisions get made, and put that on steroids.
Well, tell us about the secret tribunals. I mean, that sounds conspiratorial, but there's a lot of truth to it. It's actually not conspiratorial at all. Tell us what those secret tribunals look like under NAFTA and how they might look under the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Sure. Basically, they take claims that a corporation might have, and under NAFTA there were something like 500 cases against 95 governments by companies like Exxon or Dow Chemical or Chevron on human rights and environmental laws, and would let those companies in front of basically a tribunal of officials from different countries, but not a public tribunal, a secret tribunal, and make a decision on whether those companies should be awarded cash for basically profits that they would have made if those laws didn't exist. So in the past, recent similar deals, such as NAFTA and other bilateral deals, ended up in a total of $3 billion corporate handouts. $3 billion were handed to corporations over these kinds of laws that, you know, people in different countries around the world have passed to protect their environment and protect workers and human rights.
So we basically have a situation where these trade deals set up secret tribunals where corporations, not people who are harmed by pollution, but corporations can go to represent their interests and plead for their right to pollute or do other forms of harm. And if the tribunal rules in their favor, which they've done many times, the elected government of that country is powerless to overrule the outcome.
That's more or less right. You know, there are some provisions that they're in negotiations right now to put some safety measures and release pressure valves on some of those harsher parts of the deal, but it's because the negotiations have been secret and they've basically been open just to business representatives, not to even members of Congress or other elected officials. Forget about civil society. We actually don't know exactly how those negotiations are happening, but it looks like they're moving in that direction, which is troubling.
Why don't we know? Why don't we know about the negotiations that could have so much impact on our very lives or the lives of future generations?
That is the right question to be asking. And I think it's partly because the Obama administration and the Treasury Department, which is negotiating this deal, and their analogs, that's the other 11 countries that are part of this deal, know that it's a controversial issue, that these are issues that really matter to people, and they want to keep it secret and pass this fast-track authority so that they can get this thing passed, because otherwise they don't think that they can get it passed.
In other words, they're keeping it secret because they think we'll hate it.
I think it's a pretty sure bet that most people who have voted on laws to elect people to pass laws that protect our safety and the planet would hate sort of an ultra world government secret tribunal system that is able to undermine those laws.
Yeah, it's sort of like a Superman comic or something, sort of evil secret tribunal. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot with that phrasing, Phil. I didn't mean to do that. And of course, you can't know any more than I can truly whether we'd hate it because it's secret. So we can't know whether we'd hate it, and if so, how much. But presumably, we wouldn't love it, or it wouldn't be secret. So let me ask you one final question: where can people go to learn more about the environmental aspects of this law and do something about it?
We've got a petition set up to the folks who are negotiating this in all of the 12 countries that are potentially going to be signatories at 350.org/TPP.
Well, that's easy enough to remember. Okay, well, I'll also let the folks know that the Campaign for America's Future will also be tracking this, and that's ourfuture.org. So this is a critical issue. Phil, what's the timeline going forward? What's the likelihood of a vote in the next month, either on fast track or some other portion of this deal?
You know, I'm not out there prognosticating, but if I had to guess, I think that even the fast-track authority vote might not actually happen, that there may not be enough votes in Congress to actually pass and give President Obama the authority to approve this without bringing it to Senator Camp to get that fast-track authority moving, but it's unclear whether that's actually moving.
All right, then. Well, hopefully then they will slow walk the fast track and we won't see that. Phil Aronow of 350.org, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks a lot.
Again, I would encourage listeners to stay very, very close to this TPP issue. It could have enormous economic impact. Please watch it going forward. It's your future. Please stick with us on Take Action News. My name is R.J. Eskow, and we will be right back after these messages. Thanks for listening.
Education beyond high school, a path to opportunity and success for our young people, and the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream, because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work-study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are Federal Student Aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentAid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
Hello everyone, I'm Daniel Marins, and I'm here to talk to you about Take Action News with David Shuster. Every week we talk politics, government, and what you can do to take action. David Shuster talks with today's leading political minds.
Valerie, so many people will know your name, know your story because of those dastardly actions by the Bush administration to try to discredit your husband, who called them out for their lies that led up to the Iraq War. And in so going after him, they leaked your name. 10 years since the start of the Iraq War. Has your perspective on any of this changed? Do you still carry around any sort of anger or frustration to the Bush administration? How have you been dealing with it all these years?
Until the right is able to come to terms with the reality that we were lied into this war and it was not a good idea and it wasn't to liberate the Iraqi people, they will just continue to live in, la-la land and to perpetuate the lies that got us into the war in the first place.
Tune in from noon to 3 p.m. every Saturday, right here on We Act Radio.
When our daughter Ava was 4, we noticed she didn't talk much. A genetic test revealed that she had hearing loss caused by 2 mutated genes. One she inherited from myself, the other from her dad. If it weren't for the amazing people at U of M, we might have never known the true cause of Ava's hearing loss or how to properly treat it.
The University of Michigan C.S. Mott Children's Hospital is one of only a handful of hospitals in the world researching genetic hearing loss in addition to treating it. Our breakthrough research and advanced treatments combined with outstanding care help us change children's lives in extraordinary ways. For the leaders who invest in pediatric care, call a Mott Patient Advisor at 877-475-MOTT or visit mottchildren.org.
She is more talkative now and more social. She loves music now. She's humming to the music, and it's sweet to actually hear her humming.
To learn more, call 877-475-MOTT.
They not only helped us find answers, they helped Ava find her voice.
That's the Michigan difference.
And we are not. And we are back on Take Action News. I'm RJ Eskow, and our next guest is Professor Juan Cole of the University of Michigan. He is a history professor with expertise in the Middle East, and he also writes a terrific, highly informative blog called Informed Comment. Professor Cole, thanks so much for being with us. I'm not hearing Professor Cole.
Hello.
Professor Cole, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Listen, the reason I wanted to bring you on the program today is that for some reason, the conflict in Iraq, for which we bear, I would argue, I'm not putting words in your mouth, moral responsibility, has somehow seemed to have disappeared off virtually everybody's radar as a political issue. We're going into a campaign year. We still have some presence there, but more importantly, Iraq, as people forget it, is anything but stable. We're in the midst of what you are describing as a Sunni civil war there, with the Sunni Muslims being the minority population, the Shiites being the majority. And I wanted to have you on because you've been writing about this, and I think people need to know more about it. Could you tell us a little bit about the current situation in Iraq right now?
Sure.
Fallujah, which I understand is one of the centers of the violence, is that correct? Is presumably a Sunni stronghold, always has been, and is now, you're saying, completely outside the control of the government, and in essence a rebel stronghold?
That is correct. Not only a rebel stronghold, but the
Iraq on the false assertion that Al-Qaeda was present there, and now Al-Qaeda, or at least an organization that affiliates itself with that name, is present there, and substantially so. Is that a fair statement?
yes, there was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
Things about that assertion is that whatever many flaws Saddam Hussein had, Al-Qaeda, I understand, is primarily a Sunni movement, so he would have been very unlikely to associate with them for that, as well as other reasons, I imagine. But now we have this major Al-Qaeda presence there. What does that mean for the future? What are we looking at? We destabilized Iraq. We have the civil war going on. Now we have this growth of what must be a radical fundamentalist Sunni movement taking over places like Fallujah. What are we looking at for the prospects for the future in Iraq?
Well, the United States
It's simply their hostility, their fear of this radical fundamentalism represented by the rebels. Is that correct?
That is correct, although they are willing to cooperate with al-Maliki against al-Qaeda.
So we also had a situation where on December 31st, 44, I believe it was, Sunni members of the National Assembly, of the legislature, walked out. Does that mean that there is essentially no or very little Sunni participation in the democratic process at this point, or what we call the democratic process there?
Right. The 44
history, and what, if any, policy prescriptions should people be urging their representatives to pursue in Iraq?
Well, the United States has very little
In a
leverage.
sentence. I'm being unfair to you, but in one sentence.
Okay. The U.S. should pressure al-Maliki to make peace with the Sunnis, bring them in.
Well, thanks so much, Professor Cole, for being with us, and we'll be back on Take Action News. This is R.J. Eskow. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune in to the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Can U.S. immigration agents rummage through your laptop and cell phone for no reason and examine everything in them anytime you cross the border? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The answer, according to a recent decision by New York Federal District Court Judge Edward Corman, is yes. ICE or any other government law enforcement agent can search and read and retain anything in your electronic devices without any reason whatsoever anytime you leave or come into the country. According to this judge, electronic devices are a luxury. There's no reason why a lawyer or a member of the media need to have a computer or anything else that would store anything confidential when they travel. This recent decision reaches the polar opposite result from the decision in March 2013 from the federal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which ruled that the government must have reasonable suspicion of criminal activity before conducting a forensic search of your electronic device at the border. Catherine Crump, the ACLU attorney who is litigating the case, bluntly says there is no silver lining to this decision. The recent New York decision maintains the status quo. This means that if you are traveling internationally from a state governed by the Ninth Circuit, that is California, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, Arizona, or Nevada, you and your electronic devices have some rights. However, anywhere else in the country, you don't. Welcome to America in 2014. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
Local station WLS broadcasts a radio host who personally attacked a young woman just because he disagreed with her. She told elected officials about her classmates who rely on prescription birth control for their health. The host lobbed 46 personal attacks at her.
She's having so much sex, it's amazing she can still walk.
She's having so much sex, she's going broke buying contraceptives and wants us to buy them.
It makes her a slut, right? Makes her a prostitute. She wants to be paid to have sex.
Pick up the phone and tell WLS we don't talk about women like that in Chicago. They should be ashamed. You can reach WLS at 312-984-0890. That's 312-984-0890. Once again, call 312-984-0890 right now and tell WLS there's no place for this kind of indecency to women in Chicago. This community service announcement was paid for by Media Matters for America.
Packers.
Vikings.
We come from different places.
Uptown. Downtown.
We come to different conclusions. Half empty.
Half full.
But when we live united, we make a real difference in the building blocks of life. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly so do our communities. Real change won't happen without you.
Live United.
So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. According to a new poll from Quinnipiac University, Americans support raising the minimum wage by 71 to 27%. The poll also finds Americans support extending unemployment benefits by 58 to 37%. 51% of people polled think the minimum wage should be raised to $10.10 an hour or higher. Consideration is underway in the U.S. Senate right now to extend jobless benefits by 3 months. A new Americans United for Change national ad features some workers who are losing their unemployment benefits.
I lost my job probably about 6-7 months ago.
I'm a year short of qualifying for my retirement.
They had some cutbacks. I was the most skilled technician and also the highest paid. My retirement is going away as a result of this.
I do have a husband, thank God, or I would be homeless.
Tell Republicans restore unemployment benefits now.
I was completely blown away by how many signatures we've gotten.
A Change.org petition launched by an anonymous Staples worker has gathered more than 166,000 signatures calling on Staples to stop dodging legal requirements of the Affordable Care Act by cutting part-time hours of its workers. A worker using the pseudonym Sue Whistleblower worked for years between 30 and 35 hours a week at Staples, but starting last month, Sue and other Staples workers had their hours cut back to just 25 hours a week with no exceptions. Sue believes that Staples did it to avoid having to provide health insurance coverage to the workers under the Affordable Care Act.
I just want to thank the folks that have signed our petition at Change.org. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. This is definitely sending a clear message that Staples and other companies like this cannot abuse their workers and abuse loopholes just because they can and just to save money. And hopefully we will send a clear message. If they abuse their employees, people will take their money elsewhere.
Sue says the Affordable Care Act is working, despite efforts by Staples and others to sabotage it.
As convoluted as the process was, it worked. And I'm hoping to get my new insurance cards here shortly.
Public employees in New York City are entering new contract talks, feeling no longer demonized by the mayor. New Mayor Bill de Blasio is perceived as being much more worker-friendly than multi-billionaire Mike Bloomberg was. The unions in New York City say that a whole different tone is being set by the new mayor. The unions told New York City's labor press that the union-city relationship is going to be reset based on honesty, respect, and a shared commitment to making the city work. The 300,000 New York City public workers haven't had raises in years. The unions estimate city workers have lost a combined total of $6 to $7 billion. Nobody is expecting the contract talks to be easy, but the unions believe that the new de Blasio administration will be an effective and progressive one that respects workers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act Radio studios in Washington, D.C., heard live across the nation. This is Take Action News with Carl Frisch.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
You know, we are back on Take Action News. I am RJ Eskow, and when I listen to those presidents talking about action, I think of a quote from Rumi, who's very popular, the poet, the ancient mystical poet, who's very popular in certain circles, including some New Age circles, and people love him for his dreamy poetry, but at one point he said, everybody loves to talk about things Where is the man of action so I can show him some action? We are here to show you some action on Take Action News. If you're a man or woman of action, this is a place where we'd love to have you come. Before we talk more about what's going on in the world today, I would be remiss if I did not thank our terrific staff on Take Action News, Melissa Byrne, executive producer, the person who keeps the radio segments running on time, Troy Miller, our engineer, Peter Callahan, who is the Scotty of the operation and runs our engine room. You know, I was doing a fundraiser on the Young Turks, which is a progressive webcast and radio show that we have a good relationship with here at We Act Radio. I was doing a segment over there. They have a great new studio. And at one point, one of the engineers said, we've lost the feed from the TriCaster. And I have no idea what a TriCaster was, but I just thought that was such a Star Trek thing to say. I was really impressed. And so whenever these guys tell me that the dilithium crystals can't take much more of this, we dial down on the action. But other than that, it's action all the way. We should also thank our sponsor, Social Security Works. Check out socialsecurityworks.org to hear from them. And I guess in this last piece of commentary for the evening before we go on to three more terrific guests, I want to talk, since we're still at the beginning of the year, about an unusual sensation I experienced as I was writing my wrap-ups, my roundups of the year that's just gone past, 2013, for ourfuture.org, for the Huffington Post and elsewhere. And that strange sensation that I felt was something akin to hope. Now, I've been great, I like to think, at cheerleading people. Don't get discouraged. It's always darkest before the dawn. No movement has succeeded without fighting against resolute odds, and we're still against pretty heavy odds. But hope is something worth clinging to, too. Now, right now it's just hope, but we saw some good signs in the past year. I mean, here's a sign of how things have changed. About 5 years ago, I wrote a piece about an aggressive progressive agenda, about no more defensive play. Let's talk about expanding Social Security. Let's talk about a financial transactions tax and getting the banks under control. Let's talk about meaningful change in this country. And the biggest attention that piece got me was that Rush Limbaugh did a 10-minute attack on it. And what Rush said was, this poor, deluded Mr. Eskow really thinks that we live on a planet where anyone would consider increasing Social Security. Well, we've seen how that one changed. We've seen how that one changed, haven't we? Because what we've got now is a situation where no less an important political figure than Elizabeth Warren has signed on to the movement to increase Social Security benefits. That's being talked about very seriously. 5 years ago, it was the idea of a few theoreticians like Jacob Hacker at Berkeley and Paul Pearson, who had suggested increasing its benefits 15% because A, they're very deficient compared to those of other developed countries, and B, pensions and other retirement income have fallen dramatically in this country. Well, now that idea is under serious discussion, and we've moved the window a little bit. We could still lose, but a year ago at this time, all the talk, all the bipartisan talk in Washington was of cutting Social Security. That discussion has been changed. It's been moved as a result of what's going on, as a result of the good work progressives and others have done, shifting the tone of the conversation. Financial transactions tax not being discussed in Washington seriously, but it's definitely not off the table. Wall Street regulation, look, the regulations that were finally written as required under Dodd-Frank are not nearly what we need them to be to get Wall Street under control, because the law didn't include everything we needed to get Wall Street under control. We need Glass-Steagall. We need to break up too big to fail banks. The law didn't include that. But it was an interesting sign, a green shoot, I called it, not a new spring, but a green shoot. It was an interesting sign that those regulations drafted by the different agencies came in stronger than people expected. As I say, they're not what we needed, but they're stronger. Why? Because even after 5 years of stalling, 5 years of the administration not prosecuting bankers who committed blatant acts of fraud, 5 years of foot-dragging on some key elements of reform, there is still a political climate that wants the banks reformed, that wants the big banks restrained, that wants an economy, an economic system, and a government that makes sure that ordinary people, Main Street rather than Wall Street, are favored in policy and that people who live on Main Street have a fair chance in the American economy. So there's decent chance for changing the climate, I guess. That's number one. You've got to change the culture. You've got to change the climate. You've got to change people's moods, people's attitudes. We've made more progress there than I expected. Now, has that translated into concrete laws yet? No. One of the reasons for that is that, as one of our guests mentioned, there's not enough pressure on individual lawmakers to stay on point. Another reason why that hasn't changed is that there seems to be a culture here in Washington that says that it's wonderful to get anything passed. Now, it is good to get laws passed. It is good to get budgets passed. We need to do that. Government needs to operate. But if Democrats really are compromising and not getting the laws they support, and I hope that's the case, because Democrats who support the kind of budgets we've been seeing should be voted out of office. If Democrats have to compromise on a budget, if Democrats can't create jobs because Republicans won't let them and Republicans control Congress, then every time there's a new budget deal, the message has to be, we would have done better for you with a more progressive Congress. Every time there is an extension or a failure to extend unemployment insurance, it's got to be, here's how it would have looked if we had controlled Congress. And every time a conservative Democrat gets in the way of progressive Democrats, those progressive Democrats would have to say, here's how it would look if we controlled this party. And last but not least, we need an independent public movement that fights for change, regardless of party. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I'm RJ Eskow. We'll be back with more terrific guests after this break on Take Action News.
Sergeant Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians. 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Hey, this is RJ Eskow, and we are back on Take Action News. In our next segment, if the stars are aligned properly and the gods of the communication world are with us, we'll be with Rashad Robinson. And what we'll be talking about, presuming we get Rashad, we're having a little technical difficulty now, but what we'll be talking about is Saturday Night Live. As you know, Rashad is the executive director of Color of Change, and as you may or may not know, there has been a campaign to get a person of color, especially particularly a black woman, on the cast. And there was some delay about that, some resistance or some sense that they were unable to do that, but that has been resolved with the hiring of, I believe I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Sashir Zamata. So here to talk about that with us now is Rashad Robinson, Executive Director of the Color of Change. Rashad, are you with us?
I am. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Now, you guys had a campaign around this issue of Saturday Night Live. You want to tell us a bit about that and your thoughts about the hiring of Sashir and I believe a couple African American writers as well?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, for us, we a number of organizations were looking at sort of Saturday Night Live. Number of openings that they had back in the fall. They had about 6 openings, and when they announced the new cast members, all of them were white, and 5 of them were actually white men and one woman. And so what we saw was sort of this sort of ongoing challenge with diversity. And Saturday Night Live is one of many shows, on the air. And for us, the big challenge was, and the big conversation was the pipeline that Saturday Night Live has created over the years, the openings that it creates for more opportunities, from a Tina Fey to an Adam Sandler to an Eddie Murphy being able to get their starts in a place like Saturday Night Live. And when questions started to be asked of the cast members and of the producers, things were being said like, well, there were no black women that were ready. And this is just a larger question around when diversity doesn't exist. Oftentimes the community is not represented at the table and sort of blamed for not being ready or not being talented enough. And there's not questions around the processes to get to sort of undiverse representations. And so we did an open letter and started working with our members to raise their voices. And right before Thanksgiving, we ended up having a meeting with senior level executives at NBC to sort of bring our members' voices to the table, really talk about that this is going to be an ongoing campaign for us if something wasn't done. NBC went ahead and held a special casting call for black women to really sort of deal with the fact that in a time where you have a black family in the White House, they have no regular cast member that can even play the first lady. and were oftentimes, when they were portraying black women, were portraying them as, by the male actors who now said that they would no longer play black women. And so we led this campaign. They went ahead and had a special casting call, and out of that casting call, they hired not only a cast member, but they hired two other of the folks who auditioned as writers, which we think is important, that we're not just talking about what happens in front of the camera, but behind the camera, because it ensures that, the community is not just sort of the butt of the joke, but sort of in on the joke.
Well, that's a great point. You made a great point earlier, too. You said that, my initial reaction was, yes, I would like to see diversity on Saturday Night Live, but part of me was, yeah, but do they really even matter anymore? It was a big cultural phenomenon back in the 70s. Is that big a deal? But you make a terrific point, which is that it's a feeder system for people who frequently become huge stars afterwards. And by the way, in your list, you didn't mention a certain Senator Al Franken, senator from Minnesota, who actually used it as a platform to become a political figure. So I think that's a terrific point. And I also think that, thinking a little bit more broadly, it's fascinating to me that one of the most integrated areas of American life nowadays is pop culture, whether music less so, but still somewhat. Comedy seems to me to be almost a segregated field where there are quote-unquote black acts, and it's like race records in the 1950s or 40s or something versus hillbilly records. You have white acts and you have black acts, and it's almost as if SNL was a kind of a white act, and it's important, I think, for people to stop thinking in those terms. Was that part of your thinking?
It's absolutely part of our thinking, but it's also, Saturday Night Live has had some good moments around diversity. When the show first came on, you're absolutely right, it was a cultural phenomenon. It was also one of the first shows at its time to actually have a regular black performer in Garrett Morgan. The show is responsible for giving Richard Pryor some of his first TV time. And Lauren Michaels has, the producer and creator of the show, has talked about that as sort of one of the pieces of his legacy. But over the last several years, we've really seen that the show has basically, it's been a feeder for greater opportunity for actors, but it's also pulled from just like 2 or 3 different comedy troupes around the country, where it's pulled its talent in. And the feeder system that we're seeing with Saturday Night Live is replicated across so many industries. Color of Change has an office out, was founded out in the East Bay. And we see sort of, the impact of feeder systems that don't include diversity, and its impact on Silicon Valley and on its impact in the technology industry. We sometimes see it in politics as well, and who sort of gets those initial internships or opportunities. And the same thing ends up being reflected on Saturday Night Live. And so this conversation about diversity, about opportunity, about the path that people have to move up to higher opportunities are conversations we need to be having across sort of our various industries. But to be able to do it in a space like Saturday Night Live, which provides sort of a popular culture moment to have a bigger conversation, was also part of why we felt like this was a good campaign to take on.
Well, it's certainly gotten some publicity. It's gotten people to talking. It's gotten people to thinking. Does this set up an unfair level of pressure on Sashir and the other new members of the team? That's question number one. Question number two for you is where next? And maybe that's the more important question. I think Sashir can probably handle it herself.
I think it absolutely does set up an unfair set of obstacles for her, but that has oftentimes been the history of people who have had to break barriers, have been first, and we've seen that, and we continue to see that across many spectrums. But Sashir is an African-American woman in the entertainment industry, and she probably has experienced all sorts of, obstacles up to this point. And so, we hope that those obstacles have prepared her for what's in store for her. In terms of what's next, this is part of Color of Change's, ongoing and growing culture work. This past back in 2013, we worked to push Oxygen to cancel a reality show that was about to air called All My Baby's Mamas, with a rapper who had, 13 children by 12 women, and was going to be sort of showcasing his unconventional life. And this was what Oxygen and NBC Universal had chosen to sort of make money off of. We got Fox to cancel the reality show Cops after 25 years through our members' voices, and put it into that sort of, sensationalized look at the war on drugs and its impact on Black and poor communities. And for us, we believe holistically that you can't simply work on policy without changing culture. And so what we see and hear in the media has a tremendous effect on what they do every day, from voting to how they treat their friends, family, and neighbors. And we believe that that's going to be an ongoing piece of our work, to shift culture and shift in images so that we can utilize that to advance policy goals.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, and I wish we had more time, because I'd love to talk to you about what I perceive as a racial tilt in the reaction to Beyonce's new album, speaking of culture. Maybe we'll talk about that another time, because I've been quite impressed with the divide and the reactions to that, and other issues along these lines, culture issues. But for now, if people want to know more about the work you're doing and perhaps get involved, where should they go on the internet?
They should go to colorofchange.org. Where next week we're going to be having some big next steps in our campaign to push corporations to divest from the privatized prison industry, and start really doing some work over this year to push back against this industry, which has reaped $5 billion in profits. And they can go to our website to learn more about that and our other campaigns. They can follow us on Twitter at Color of Change, or me on Twitter at Rashad Robinson.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, Rashad Robinson, Executive Director of Color of Change. We'll be watching Sashir Zamata on Saturday Night Live, which will be, by the way, get us back to that show for the first time in a while. We'll be watching your work at colorofchange.org. I hope you'll come back and see us again on Take Action News.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And we will be back right after this break with Laura Friedenbach, who is the press secretary of the Progressive Congressional Campaign Committee, talking about the upcoming congressional races. Please, and we'll be closing with Bonnie Raines, who is one of the newly self-confessed FBI burglars from the early 70s. Don't go away. You want to hear those interviews. I'm RJ Eskow, and you are listening to Take Action News.
You're listening to WEACT Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Breast health awareness is critical for all women, particularly African Americans, because we have an increased risk of dying from breast cancer compared to women of other backgrounds. At U of M, I'm doing research here and with women in Ghana to look for an inherited link that makes African and African American women susceptible to a more aggressive type of cancer. Finding this link, I believe, will make new treatments possible. But right now, making sure that you are properly screened is our best protection.
With experts like Dr. Lisa Newman, the University of Michigan Health System is a leader in cancer care. When you call our free Cancer Answer line at 800-865-1125, an oncology nurse will answer any questions you might have about the prevention, screening, and treatment of breast cancer and other forms of cancer. All calls are confidential. Call 800-865-1125 or visit uofmhealth.org/Cancer Answer line.
We're working to help everyone enjoy longer, healthier lives.
That's the Michigan difference.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/Guard Reserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Hey, I'm Anderson Cooper. As a parent, you want to make sure that your child knows how to deal with bullying when they see it happening. And chances are they want to help, but they don't really know how. Well, teach them that the best thing to do is calmly walk away, find a teacher or other adult, and speak up. And do your part. Be that adult they can talk to and trust will listen. Join me to help stop bullying. Go to stopbullying.gov to find out more.
The true definition of hero. And being a hero took a heroic effort.
Every day we bring to our fans the world of sports. We speak of heroes and heroism, but there are days when sports matter little and heroes matter more. These heroes don't hit walk-off homers or buzzer-beating threes. They simply made a plan for what to do when disaster strikes. You never know when you might need to be the hero, because you never know if today is the day before a natural disaster. Prepare, plan, be a hero. Visit ready.gov.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune in to the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
I'm RJ Eskow, and we are back on Take Action News. We have our next guest for you. We have Laura Friedenbach, who is press secretary of PCCC, which is an acronym whose meaning I'm told I blew in the last segment in leading and teasing into it. I believe it is the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. Is that right, Laura? Laura, are you with us?
I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Thanks for coming on the show, and help me out since apparently I got it wrong. PCCC stands for what?
The Progressive Change Campaign Committee. I think you got it right the second time.
Okay, good. Well, you know, that's a 50% grade. I'm moving up. Soon I'll be out of the F category into the Ds. Hey, thanks so much for coming on and seeing us. Obviously, we're looking forward to the start of what will be an election year. You guys have done a lot to try to move the composition of Congress towards the left and towards true progressivism. So tell us, what are your key campaigns you're targeting this year? What are the key issues? What are you looking at for the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, well, first, it's great to be on the show. And, going forward into 2014, for folks who don't know what the Progressive Change Campaign Committee is all about, we're working to build progressive power around the country. And so that means a couple of things for us. That firstly, we're trying to forward progressive issues and build momentum around things like expanding Social Security, holding Wall Street accountable, and forwarding campaign finance reform, things that matter to everyday Americans that really, really think should be on our congressmen and women's agendas. So that's step one. Step two is making sure that we actually elect bold progressive leaders who are going to forward these issues. And so we're really excited at moving into 2014, an election year, and being able to put forward some great candidates and help them win. Thinking about sort of the things that we're looking to highlight in 2014, I think it makes sense to think back into 2013 and some of the successes that we had then. And I know that Social Security is something that we pushed in the past a lot. I know it's something that's near and dear to your heart. And I heard I actually caught you on a recent interview saying that at the beginning of 2013, you were pessimistic. You didn't think that expanding Social Security was something that would be on anyone's radar, or that we might not be successful in defending from cuts. Am I right?
Well, yeah, I never gave up fighting, but the odds looked pretty long.
Yeah, so I think it's important to sort of explain how we got from, I think a lot of people were in your camp, feeling like that the majority of Democrats were in this sort of defensive position, believing that, they needed to defend Social Security and believing that Social Security is important, but not leading the conversation beyond defending it from cuts. And we saw this as a problem. One of the things that we do is polling around the country, and so in our polls we noticed that the majority of Americans agree that we should be expanding Social Security. Not only should we be defending it from cuts, but it's a vital program that a lot of our seniors rely on, and we thought it was important to work to expand Social Security, and we found out that the majority of Americans agree with us. And there was this disconnect between how the conversation was going and what. Well,
let me jump in for a second, Laura, and ask you about that disconnect, because a lot of people feel that disconnect happened because our progressive energy, if we want to call it that, was channeled into electing Democrats who told us they would pursue that agenda, which is the agenda that's not just Democrats or liberals want, but that most Americans want in many cases. And yet when they got into office, many of them did something completely different. So what do we do in addition to electing people who say the right things to make sure they do the right things?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that we're working on every day here. So one of the things we do is we start working with campaigns really early, sometimes before people have even decided to announce. We want to find those progressive candidates who we think are going to be really strong fighters once they get into Congress, and are not only going to be writing legislation on this, but they're going to be partnering with grassroots and really pushing the envelope and pushing these progressive issues forward. So, think of people like Elizabeth Warren, who is constantly out there battling for progressive issues and really putting up a fight. And so we want more progressives like her in Congress. And sometimes that starts with finding people and drafting them to run. We ran a Draft Elizabeth Warren campaign back before she announced that she was running, and raised $500,000 before day one of her campaign. And so now we're trying to do that.
I'm going to jump in just for a second and say that I owe you guys an apology, because I'm almost never wrong about anything. But I wasn't a big fan of that Draft Elizabeth Warren movement, because I thought she would get into office and just be another one of those over-compromising Democrats. But she's been terrific. And so I guess my question for you is, okay, we support you on that. We want more Elizabeth Warrens in the House and in the Senate. What do we do with the Democrats who aren't on the right side of this issue? Do we primary them? Do you guys go out and recruit people who will run as true progressives and represent the popular will on this stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a perfect question. It's a great question. And so what we propose and what we work towards every day is getting on those talking with those campaigns really early and presenting them with the polling data that we see on a daily basis, that, in states like Kentucky and Texas, states that are red states, in these places you find that you poll on issues like expanding Social Security, and the majority of Americans, even in those red states, believe that we should be expanding Social Security. And that goes
we're running, I'm sorry to cut in, but we're running out of time. Where can people go to learn more about you guys and your work? We got about 10 seconds.
Sure. It's boldprogressives.org. That's where you can go, sign up for our emails, and we will keep you up to date on who's running and who you can help elect in 2014.
Laura Friedenbach of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, or words to that effect. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm RJ Eskow, and you're listening to Take Action News.
For me, guns are for hunting and protecting my family. I believe in the Second Amendment, and I'll fight to protect it. But with rights come responsibilities. That's why I support comprehensive background checks, so criminals and the dangerously mentally ill can't buy guns. That protects my rights and my family.
Tell Congress, don't protect criminals. Vote to protect gun rights and our families with comprehensive background checks. Demand action now.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Shuster, your host of Take Action News. On our show, we talk government, politics, and what you can do to have an impact. We're nonpartisan, report like hell, and let the chips fall where they may. We feature segments like social media, activists of the week, and the latest news affecting our communities. So join us every Saturday and make a difference. Yes, you and I, we can do this. That's Take Action News on the air, online, and at your podcast convenience on iTunes each week on the We Act Radio Network.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu. or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org. or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
100% success rate in modifying your home. Free consultation. At 10%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-995-HOPE or visit HUD.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
Our children are exposed to violence every day, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
I'm RJ Eskow, and we're back on Take Action News. Our guests for this final segment are John and Bonnie Rains, who got a great deal of press coverage over the last week for coming forward and telling the world that they were the burglars who broke into an FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania in the early 1970s and released the documents that told the world about the operation known as COINTELPRO. John and Bonnie, thank you for being with us.
Yes.
Glad to be here.
Now, before we start, I'm sure you've been asked and answered the same questions over and over in the last week, and there'll probably be some of that on this segment too. But I just wanted to start by telling you something, which is that when I first read your story, and the two of you had small children at home at the time that this burglary took place, so you were looking at the very real possibility of a long incarceration if you were caught. And I know you've been criticized by some on the right who have said that it was irresponsible to run that risk with small children. And I just want to tell you what my reaction was when I read that part of your story, which was I was deeply moved, almost to tears, at the idea that the two of you cared so much about the society that your children would grow up in, that you were willing to be separated from them if necessary during their childhood years. So I just wanted to tell you that I respect you, I admire you, and I saw that as a sign of self-sacrifice and nothing more. So
thank you
for your service.
Mm-hmm.
So, and now on to the questions, which is you did this because you felt you were the only ones who could do it, you felt you were the only ones who would do it, and what specifically did you think you were going to accomplish?
Well, I think it's important for this generation to realize the massive power of J. Edgar Hoover. He was more powerful than presidents. Presidents would last at most 8 years. He ran the FBI for almost 5 decades, and the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover was a mirror image of his own biases as to what constituted legitimate activity and what was un-American activity. Nobody in Washington was going to hold that gentleman accountable. They were all either enamored of him or they were terrified of him. And presidents were intimidated. He had his special files that he let everybody know that whatever private activities they might be embarrassed by, he had that all on file. So we faced a situation where an immensely powerful institution in Washington, investigative institution that was powerful in the country, was totally out of control of any supervision. And it was under those conditions that some of us decided that we needed to form a independent citizens commission to investigate the FBI.
And this was part of your investigation, in other words. Now, how likely did you consider it that you would be caught and imprisoned for this activity?
Well, we were not reckless, and we were a small group of 8 who were all very. We were a tight-knit group, and we had similar values, and we were going to proceed with the plans very, very carefully and strategically, and we weren't going to attempt to do it until we thought that we had a very, very good chance of succeeding and not being caught.
And at what point did you look at the material you'd acquired and say to yourselves, "Oh my God, we've hit pay dirt here"?
Go ahead, John.
Oh well, it was the morning of the 9th, the morning of day 8 when we started the process, and we started sorting the files that we had, almost 1,000 files altogether, into the criminal files, legitimate criminal files, about 40%, and then those that were clearly political in intent, and that was about 60%. And we set aside the criminals. We weren't going to do anything with those files. We started sorting through the political files, and it wasn't more than half an hour into that process, but all of a sudden somebody said, oh, look here, and we all ran over there. There we were at different tables sorting these. And here was the file, the famous file, actually, that was sent to Hoover by somebody in the FBI saying that the whole purpose of their intensive surveillance was to, and here I quote, was to increase the paranoia endemic in these kind of groups. I continue the quote directly, and have them think that there is an FBI agent behind every mailbox, end quote. When we had that one, we knew that we nailed them, because this was not surveillance. This was the attempt to use surveillance, massive surveillance, infiltrators, and so on, to take the voice of dissent away from dissent. It was intimidation. That was the purpose.
And for our younger listeners who might not know the term, your discovery revealed COINTELPRO in just 30 seconds or so, I guess. Tell them what COINTELPRO was.
Well, it was a long-ranging. It began, I think, in 1956 as a major activity of the FBI, and it was targeted to any groups who were dissenting, organizing to protest and dissent. Everything from African American groups who were organizing around civil rights to anti-war protesters, and it was intended to penetrate those groups and take away their voice and their influence. And it was all very, very secret. And it was the first time that the public learned about this extensive, massive initiative of the FBI.
They targeted, COINTELPRO targeted the Black Panther Party and essentially destroyed it.
So our listeners many of them might not know the term COINTELPRO, but they might know some of the individual stories, the surveillance of the Black Panthers. I don't know if specifically the surveillance, the wiretapping of Martin Luther King was part of this operation, but it was certainly the FBI. Basically, the idea that I'm sorry, go ahead.
COINTELPRO.
Yes, okay. So now, why you've come forward now at a time when this is very much a part of the national discussion again, because of the revelations we've seen through Edward Snowden. And now, unlike Snowden, you guys, there were no computers then, small computers then. This was paper. You guys were carrying lots of paper.
That's right.
But Edward Snowden has done something very similar. What are your thoughts on Snowden, and did that affect your timing or the way you came out, or how did you react when you heard about Edward Snowden?
Well, it didn't affect the timing. What has happened in this last week was the release of a book by Betty Metzger about the event on March 8th, 1971, and also a documentary called 1971, which has been is telling the same story. It's an interesting coincidence, however, because I think it allows a very serious discussion to be generated around surveillance and invading the privacy of American citizens.
Yeah, both
sorry, go ahead,
the
John.
FBI under Hoover and NSA were very much involved in massive surveillance and the use of massive surveillance, and now, of course, with high technology that wasn't available back for Hoover. But both of them wanted to get away with this off stage without any of us knowing about it. They were, in that sense, a rogue agencies, both the FBI back under Hoover and NSA today, in the sense that the only regulation that NSA is now under is legislation written in 1979, and that was before there were even cell phones. The technology of surveillance and a collection of evidence about our personal lives is just exponentially increased in those years. We need new regulations.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I guess one of the things that people are saying to discredit Snowden, and potentially might say about you as well, and I'd be interested in your reaction to this, people tend to say, well, who are you? You're just one citizen. Who are you to decide what gets to stay secret and what gets revealed to the public? Isn't that a government function? Aren't you kind of taking that on, assuming that for yourself? What do you say to people who have that kind of reaction?
Well, we do have a Constitution with a First and a Fourth Amendment, so that is directly related to violating people's constitutional rights, and I'm talking about every ordinary citizen. So I think there is an obligation when there is no accountability, and such tactics are being used to try to destroy things that are supposed to be guaranteed under our Constitution in the way of a voice of dissent, then I think that a person has to take on some new responsibility to get to the truth. And that's what we were attempting to do, and it was to reveal the truth of what had been going on for many, many years with no scrutiny from Washington, and really only one way to document what had been going on, and that was to get their own files and documents and have them published in the press.
Snowden and us were trying to do the same thing. That is, simply get information out to the public that would not have gotten out any other way.
No other way.
So that the public could then have the information to begin a new discussion back in 1971 and now today in 2014, to begin a discussion about what is the appropriate and inappropriate government activity. We were simply supplying fellow citizens with the information they needed to exercise their ultimate sovereignty, because in a democracy, it's not official folks down in Washington who are the seat of sovereignty. It is we the people.
Well, I couldn't say it better, and I think that's a great place for us to conclude. John and Bonnie Rains, your story is coming out in the movie 1971, in the new book about the FBI burglary in Media, Pennsylvania. And I think it's a great opportunity for people to renew their discussion about our responsibilities and rights in a free society. Thank you so much for being with us on Take Action.
You're very welcome.
Right.
Very welcome.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. That was John and Bonnie Rains talking about what they did when there was a vacuum of power and a vacuum of action to reclaim our society, to share information among all the people. In our own small way, we try to share information here on Take Action News. We look forward to continuing to do that in the months and years to come. Join us next week on Take Action News. I'm RJ Eskow. Thanks so much for being with us, and join us next week.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Okay, Garland, are you ready for this? I was born ready, Dad. Are you? I'm ready as I'll ever be. It's showtime.
Ladies and gentlemen, please silence your phones unless you're listening to the presentation on your phone, in which case silencing would defeat the purpose. The old year has passed, the new year is about to begin, award season is just getting underway. But starting now, the most important prize in public life aren't the Emmys, the Grammys, the Oscars, or the Tonys. Because the time has come, at last, for the annual, one and only, beloved, coveted, controversial, progress-heralding, villain-shaming, internet-exclusive Winnie Awards! The Winnie Awards are presented by The Good Fight, the #1 podcast about people changing the world, and powered by The Good Fight sponsor and partner, the 8 million member progressive advocacy community, MoveOn.org. Want to win a campaign for justice and earn your own spot on next year's Winnie Awards? Start a petition now at MoveOn.org. Now it's time to meet our host, the Win Report's beloved co-anchor, MoveOn National Campaign Director, and Detroit's own favorite son, a father of two, 6'8" giant of justice, Garland Gilchrist II.
Thank you.
Now joining him on stage, a proud Wisconsinite in Washington, a fellow father, Win Report co-anchor, and a man whose microphone is mightier than the pen and a sword combined. Because who uses a sword pen? It's the host of The Good Fight, Ben Wickler.
Thank you. Please put